Like to welcome a first-time guest onto the Rebound Rundown, a great friend of mine, Tommy Godin, who covers Villanova for the Road to the Garden and the Villanova Insider Network. Tommy, on the eve as we record this of Xavier playing Villanova at the Cintas Center at 6:30 on Tuesday night, this is a big game for both sides. It's great to have you on the show to talk about it. How you doing?
I'm doing wonderful, Paul. Thank you for having me on. Big fan of the show.
I appreciate it. Well, yeah, let's dive right into it here about this one because, like I said, at least from the Xavier perspective, I think this is a massive game for the Musketeers. I think this is a swing game for Xavier that could tell the story of a large part of the regular season left for Xavier because they have 14 games remaining, including this one. But of their next 7 games, all of their quad one opportunities come in that 7-game stretch. The second half of these 14 games, the last 7 games of the regular season, it's all quad 2, quad 3. I don't believe there's a quad 4 in there, but quad 2 and quad 3 opportunities. So all of that is to say that this Villanova game really kicks off this stretch here in the next 3 weeks of what this season could be for Xavier if they're able to win 3 or 4 of those games to maybe make a push toward the bubble again, because right now they're not on the bubble and they need to get back to that point. From Villanova's perspective, coming off a pretty significant stretch, I know they just dropped one the other day against St. John's. That was in the Garden. It was an electric game. Where do you fall here, Tommy? I'm going to start with this. Where do you fall on where Villanova is now? Are they all the way back? Are they just a little bit better than maybe people thought they were going to be? Is it all because of Eric Dixon? And we'll see how long this can go. Where are you right now on Villanova?
Yeah, I think the truth lies somewhere in the middle right there, right? We've had Villanova's had a nice stretch of wins dating back to the 27th of November. They beat Rider. I come in peace on this podcast. We took care of business against Cincinnati, but that win is looking worse and worse every day that they play. But, I mean, aside from that, before the UConn game, the average KenPom ranking of the opponents that they beat was 181.5. So, I mean, once Villanova beat UConn, it was kind of like, okay, maybe this is real. And then they dropped a tough one on the road against St. John's. So I'm not sure where we're at with Villanova. It's still up in the air. This game, I think, for both teams is going to be a good measuring stick game.
One of the biggest questions, obviously, that you have going into this game is what do you do with Eric Dixon? How do you go about trying to guard one of the best players, not just in the Big East this year, but around the entire country? He's quite simply put Villanova on his back and carried them to where they are now at this point, with Villanova sitting at 11-6 on the season and 4-2 in the conference. What have teams done when he's been great all year, but when he maybe hasn't had the A+ game, why has that been?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if you go back to the UConn game, they were denying him the ball before he got it. So usually once Eric Dixon gets the ball in the low post, his passing has been tremendous this year. Teams usually send 2 defenders at him. What UConn was doing was having 2 defenders kind of in that area before he could get the ball, denying him the ball. He didn't take an open shot that whole game, and he took a lot of shots. So, I mean, at the end of the day, Eric Dixon is going to get his. He's a top 5 3-point shooter in the country. He's a leading scorer in the country right now. He's going to get his at the end of the day, no matter how many people you throw at him. He's got to try and limit the other guys around him, I think.
What's the pulse of Nova Nation right now? Because I know going into the year, there were a lot of questions, a lot of coaching questions, a lot of talent questions. Just in general, there were a lot of maybe doubts going into this year. Have those doubts been maybe put aside at all, or is there still some uneasiness?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the questions about this offseason have stemmed from the head coach and the uncertainty there. I don't think it would be unreasonable to say that he was on the hot seat coming into the season. I think that's cooled down a little bit. The talks have. I don't want to say his seat isn't hot anymore because, frankly, over the past couple of years, he's around a 500 head coach at Villanova. So I think right now, I think a lot of the noise is quieting down around him. But there's still a lot of questions, not only about him, but about this team as well, outside of Jameer Brickus, Wilga Poplar, and Eric Dixon.
Yeah, so that leads into my next question. The supporting cast around Eric Dixon. You just mentioned those 3 names, and those were the 3 I was going to bring up. So I'll let you talk a little bit about them and maybe what they can bring to the table here against Xavier on Tuesday.
Yeah, certainly. So I'll start with Jameer Brickus. In Kyle Neptune's 3 years at Villanova, he hasn't had a guard like Jameer Brickus, a true ball handler, right? He's had Mark Armstrong and Justin Moore, who were great in their own right, but he's never had a true quarterback on the floor like he has with Jameer Brickus this year for Villanova. He's averaging 5.6 assists per game. He's had double-digit assists twice this year, which nobody has done since Colin Gillespie his last year at Villanova. It's been truly special to see what a good guard could do with the talent around him, like Eric Dixon and Wooga Poplar. He's an NBA player that's playing for Villanova right now. His speed, his explosiveness, he's finding his shot, averaging 18 points per game over his last 4 games, and he's leading Villanova in rebounding as well, with 6.6 rebounds a game as a guard. He is a special player. Wooga is.
So I think when I talk about how big of a game this is for both teams, I mean, you look at this game from Villanova's perspective. They're going on the road, and I know Xavier has maybe underperformed this year due to the expectations that were put on them going into the season and everything else. But they've been right there in so many big games that just haven't gone their way. They haven't gotten any of those games to go their way. So from Villanova's perspective, what do you think this game means to the Villanova season? You know, like I said, sitting at 11-6, you're 4-2 in the conference. You have Xavier, Providence, Georgetown, a winnable stretch here, because then you come home after this game, after 2 straight on the road, you come back home to play Providence and Georgetown in Philadelphia. So this Tuesday night against Xavier, where is this on the importance level for you in terms of the season?
Yeah, I know if you ask anyone on the team, especially Coach Neptune, he will tell you that this game is his team's Super Bowl because it is their next game. But they do need to take this one seriously. I mean, you look back, Villanova and Xavier have had some battles in the past. I was at the game last year. Fremantle had 30-something. He might have had 40-something at the Finn last year. It's going to be a tough game for both teams. Luckily for Xavier, this is a quad 2 game. I saw somebody, no idea who, sent a tweet out that Xavier in quad 2 through 4 games does pretty well. Quad 1 games, not so much. So this will be a quad 2 game for them. Both teams need this win a lot. It's going to be high pace, high energy. I'm really looking forward to this one tomorrow.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, again, this game for Xavier, and to the tweet that you just mentioned that I put out earlier, Xavier 0-7 this season in quad 1 opportunities. A couple of those games might drop down. St. John's, TCU, those might end up dropping to quad 2 when the season's all said and done. But if you look at the rest of their schedule, they're 10-0 as we sit right now on January 13th in quads 2 through 4. So between the quad 1 games and quads 2 through 4, Xavier just has to get a couple more of those to go their way, and a couple more of those, any of those, to go their way, and you start to talk about this season from a different perspective. And that's where I think that this one, I'll never say that a game is a must win. I'm not that guy. But this one is as close to one of those, it feels like to me, as it could be in a regular season, just because you don't want to continue dropping these games that mean something when it's already the middle of January. It's crazy to say, though. It really is. Last question for you here, Tommy. When Villanova has had their most success this year, and I know the easy answer would be to say Eric Dixon scores 35, but when Villanova has had their most success this year, when has it been?
When the ball's moving on the offensive end and when the guys are communicating on the defensive end. Villanova at times can get a little stagnant in their half-court sets, play a lot of hero ball, just give it to Eric Dixon and get out of his way. They really need to utilize the assets that Jameer Brickus is giving them as their true point guard. And on the defensive end, for comparison, Villanova is ranked 11th in offensive efficiency, 178th in defensive. Their best defense has been of late If you remember that UConn game, they stifled them 3 times in the last 30 seconds, which was unbelievable. If you've watched their defense so far this year, they play slow, so they have to play together. That's definitely when they're playing at their best.
Tommy, I appreciate it. Yeah, it was 2 seasons ago. Fremantle was hurt last year, but it was 2 seasons ago that Xavier won at Villanova for the first time ever, and Fremantle won for 29. So that. I'm sure that's the one. That took a lot after a decade to finally win out there in Philly.
Felt like 50.
Tommy, I introduced you in the beginning, but anywhere else that people can find your stuff or listen to you, read what you do, anything like that?
Yeah, I appreciate it. You can find me on Twitter at Tommy Godin Jr., Road to the Garden podcast. All of our Road to the Garden writers do fantastic work, so shout out to all of them as well.
Appreciate it, Tommy.
Thank you.